The flag at the 600-yard line hung dead that morning, no wind to speak of, and I remember thinking it would be an easy day to shoot and a hard day to learn anything. I was prone behind my rifle on a clear Saturday in the spring of 2026, working a slow string at 600 yards, and I was happy in the small, complete way I am only ever happy with the stock against my cheek and nothing in my head but the next round. The grass had been cut the day before. You could smell it under the burnt powder. The brass came warm out of the chamber into my palm, and I set each piece in a little row beside my mat, the way I have set things in rows my whole life, because a person who keeps her small things in order has a better chance of keeping her large things in order when the large things come apart. I had driven out alone, the way I like to. The range was a regional facility an hour south of the base, the kind of place that draws everybody, old men with rifles older than they are, young men with rifles newer than their trucks, a scatter of veterans, and on any given Saturday, a handful of active duty Marines down from the base to shoot on their own time. It was an open match day, nothing serious, paper and steel, out to 1,000 yards, a small entry fee that went to a veterans fund. I had paid my $20 at the folding table and signed the book and found an open lane and become, as I prefer to become, invisible. I am good at invisible. I have had a lot of practice. I am 40 years old. I wear plain clothes and plain boots. I carry a plain bag, and I do not talk on the line. I had learned a long time ago that the loudest person on any line is almost never the one you want next to you when it matters. So I did not announce myself, and I did not need to, and that suited me down to the ground. The two of them set up 4 positions to my right about 20 minutes after I did. I heard them before I saw them, which tells you most of what you need to know. They were young, early 20s, fit in the particular way that means somebody is paying for their fitness, and they carried themselves with the loud certainty of men who have been told they are dangerous and have not yet been tested on the claim. One was bigger, a corporal by the chevrons on the cap he had no business wearing on a civilian line, and the other was leaner and laughed at everything the first one said. I did not know their names yet. I would learn them soon enough. The corporal was Tyler Rourke. The lean one was Brody Ingram. By the end of the day, I would know more about both of them than they knew about themselves. They shot a while, and they shot fine, the way young men with good eyes and good equipment shoot when nothing is on the line but their own opinion of themselves. And then the corporal noticed me. I felt it the way you feel a draft from a door opening behind you. I kept my eye in the scope and finished my round and brought the bolt up slow. And I heard him say it, not quiet, not meant to be quiet, meant to carry the whole length of the firing line. That one's a tourist who might... Just, he said. She probably thinks the safety is the trigger. A couple of men laughed. Not all of them, but a couple. The way people laugh at a thing they would not have said themselves but are relieved someone else did. The lean one, Ingram, lifted his phone and filmed a few seconds of me, the back of me, the tidy little row of brass, the woman who did not belong, and he laughed too. I want to tell you what I did, because what I did is the whole story, and it is the part that matters more than the fire. I finished my string, I lifted the bolt and laid the rifle safe, and I collected my brass, one warm piece at a time, into the cloth bag I keep for it. I did not turn around. I did not look at him. I had been called worse by better, and I had stopped, years before, spending myself on rooms that had already decided what I was. There is a kind of peace that costs you a great deal to buy, and then never has to be bought again. And I had paid for mine in a country those two boys could not have found on a map, and I was not going to hand it back across a firing line for the price of a corporal's joke. The old man in the lane to my left, a Vietnam veteran named Harlan Mott, who must have been 70 if he was a day, leaned over and muttered that the kid was an idiot. I shrugged. He's young, I said. Young and sure. It's a survivable condition. Harlan laughed, a dry sound, and went back to his rifle. I seated the next round and settled back down behind the gun, and I let the laughter die the way a fire dies when you stop feeding it. The flag hung dead. The morning kept moving as if nothing had broken, but something had been set down between us on that gravel, the corporal and me, and it would be picked back up before noon, and it would weigh a great deal more than either of us could have guessed. I should tell you what was in my truck, because it tells you who I am better than I can. There was a range bag, packed with a Corman's economy, every pouch, the same as it had been for 15 years, because I do not believe in moving things that work. There was water, and there was food I did not want, and there was a folded space blanket I have never gone anywhere without since I was 25. And behind the seat, where another person might keep a jack or a jug of washer fluid, there was a trauma kit. Not a first aid kit. A trauma kit. The real thing, tourniquets and chest seals and a decompression needle and an airway and quick clot and a pair of shears worn smooth at the pivot. I have never once in my adult life thought of that kit as optional. People who have not done the work think of a bag like that as paranoia. People who have done the work know it is just memory, made physical, riding behind the seat. On the front of the truck, there was a license plate that marked me as a recipient of the Silver Star. I had almost traded it for a plain one. I want you to understand that. I had sat in the parking lot of the registry with the form filled out to surrender it, because I hate being asked about it. I hate the way a stranger's face changes. I hate having to decide in a half second whether to lie and say it was nothing or tell the truth and watch them not know what to do with the truth. The only reason I still had the plate was that the wait at the registry that day was 3 hours long, and I could not face sitting in a plastic chair for 3 hours to explain to a clerk why I wanted to give back the loudest thing I owned. Because that is the part people get wrong about a medal. They think it is the loud part of you. For me, it was the quietest thing I had. I kept it in a sock drawer at the back, under the wool ones I never wore, and most days I forgot it was there, and that was the way I wanted it. The medal was not the story. The medal was a receipt for the story, and you do not frame your receipts. After the Navy, I had built a quiet life on purpose, the way you build a wall on purpose, brick by deliberate brick, so that it will hold. I flew on a critical care helicopter now, a civilian flight paramedic, which is the closest thing the civilian world has to the job I used to do, and I had chosen it the way I choose everything, by asking which version of the days ahead would let me keep being useful without requiring me to perform. On the aircraft, no one cares who you were. No one cares about a plate on a truck or a ribbon in a drawer. They care whether your hands are steady at 3 a.m. over a wreck on a dark interstate. And mine are, and that is the entire conversation, and I have loved it for being that simple. I had a small house, and a dog who was getting old, and a standing Tuesday phone call with a friend who understood me, and I had decided, somewhere along the way, that a small life, lived precisely, was worth more than a large life lived loud. I did not need the range to tell me anything about myself. I came to the range the way other people go to church, to practice a stillness I did not want to lose, in a building full of strangers who would never know my name. Between strings that morning, I rolled my right shoulder against an ache that lives in it now and always will. There is hardware in that shoulder, a plate and some screws, the souvenir of the day they gave me the receipt for. I am 40, and I shoot better than men half my age, and the reason I shoot better is not talent. The reason is that I was taught by men who took it seriously because their lives ran through my hands, and most of those men are not alive to see how well I learned the lesson, and so I keep shooting well, partly as a way of keeping a promise to people who can no longer collect on it. You might ask why I still come to a range at all, if I hate the attention and the questions, if a place like that is a minefield of men like the corporal. I've asked myself the same thing. The answer is the same reason I run at 5 a.m. when the streets are empty and the dark is honest. I do not do it to prove anything. I do it to stay a particular kind of calm, a calm that has a use, a calm I cannot afford to lose because the day I lose it might be the day somebody needs it. I did not keep my hands steady for sport. I kept them steady because once, a long time ago, steady hands were the only thing standing between a boy and the end of his life, and I have not been able to forget the math of that since. You learn, in that work, that panic is a luxury paid for by the patient. You learn to put your own fear in a box and set the box down and pick it up later when there is time, and sometimes there is never time, and you carry the box around for years. I have a closet full of those boxes. But my hands are steady. They were steady that morning. I breathed out, and the reticle went still, and the round broke clean, and not one person on that line understood that the stillness they were ignoring had cost me a war. To a certain kind of man, a woman with a medical bag is furniture. I do not say that with bitterness. I say it as a fact I observed across 2 deployments and a great many ordinary days. When I first joined a Marine Infantry battalion as their corpsman, back in 2007, I was 19 going on 20, and they called me Doc the way you call a tool by its name, and most of them did not look at me twice. I was support. I was the greenside sailor who carried the bag. I was, to the loud ones, a slightly inconvenient piece of the gear list, right up until the first bad day, and then I was God. And then every one of them knew my first name, and the name of my sisters and what I took in my coffee. Because a man who has watched you keep his friend breathing develops a sudden and total interest in your well-being. The trick, the whole trick of that job, is to be exactly the same person in both minutes. The same in the minute when you are furniture, and the same in the minute when you are the only thing between a 19-year-old and the dark. If you let the first minute make you small, you will not be ready for the second. If you let the second minute make you proud, you will not survive the first. So you become flat, you become steady, you become, on purpose, hard to insult and hard to rattle, because both of those are just weather, and you have work to do in all weather. There is a particular loneliness to being indispensable and invisible at the same time, and I want to name it plainly, because if you have lived it, you already know it, and if you have not, you should understand what it does to a person. You learn to expect nothing from rooms. You learn to read a room in the first 10 seconds to know which men have decided you are furniture, and to stop wasting any part of yourself trying to change their arithmetic, because the arithmetic will change on its own the first bad day and not 1 second before. It makes you patient in a way that looks like coldness from the outside. It makes you stop auditioning. The men who called me Doc like I was a tool, and then a week later could not say my name without their voices going careful, they did not teach me to be bitter. They taught me to be still. They taught me that the only verdict on my worth that would ever hold was the one I reached alone, before anybody needed anything, in the long, ordinary stretches when no one was watching and no one was bleeding, and I had to decide for myself whether I was the kind of person who would be ready. I learned the deepest version of that lesson in the summer of 2011 in Helmand Province when I was 25 years old and a petty officer second class and about as good at my job as I would ever get. I will tell you only what you need, because I do not spend it cheaply and I will not spend it cheaply now. We were moving in a small convoy on a road that was not a road so much as a suggestion of one. The truck 2 ahead of mine struck a buried charge. I have tried for 15 years to describe the sound, and I cannot, because it is not a sound. It is a thing that happens to your whole body at once, and your ears are only a small part of it. The truck went up onto its side, and it began to burn. I remember it in pieces. That is how it stays with you. In pieces, never the whole thing at once, which is a mercy and a curse. I remember the heat coming off it like a wall you could lean on. I remember the door, how wrong the door was, folded where a door should not fold. I remember the weight of a man who could not help me carry himself, how a body that cannot assist you weighs 3 times what it should. I remember a young lance corporal named Bishop calling for his mother in a small, clear voice, the way they do, the way that undoes you if you let it, so you do not let it. I remember a corporal named Tovar, and I remember deciding with my whole self that I was not going to let go of Tovar, and I did not let go of Tovar. Fire does not care how brave you are, it only cares how fast. That is the truth I came home with. So I learned to do the next correct thing, and then the next correct thing, and to keep my voice flat the entire time, because a calm voice is its own kind of tourniquet. You can stop a certain amount of bleeding with the right words, said in the right tone, and I do not entirely understand the mechanism, but I have seen it work, and I used it that day until my own voice gave out. I took shrapnel in the shoulder and the back, and I did not notice until later, which is common. A helicopter came. 2 of the 3 lived. The Navy gave me a silver star and a Purple Heart, and I went to 2 funerals in my dress uniform and stood very straight and said the right things, and then I came home and put the receipt in a sock drawer. People called it the bravest day of my life. I have never been able to call it that. I have only ever been able to call it the worst 9 minutes I ever lived through, laminated and handed back to me as an honor. Back on the line that Saturday for just a second, the smell of the cut grass and the burnt powder crossed with the smell of a memory, the way they sometimes do, uninvited, and I was for one breath in 2 places at once. Then I blinked it away, because that is also a skill, and I racked the bolt, and I was a 40-year-old woman at a rifle match again, and the worst thing about me and the best thing about me went back to sleep together in the same bed where they have always slept. It was Gunnery Sergeant Galt who called the ceasefire, although he was retired and nobody was obligated to call him Gunny anymore, and everybody did anyway, because some men carry the rank in their spine long after they have taken it off their collar. Vernon Galt ran that range. He was 58, gray, built like a man who had spent 30 years carrying other men's gear in addition to his own, and he had the specific, unhurried competence of someone who has seen enough go wrong that very little surprises him. He stood up in the little tower and called the line cold in a voice that did not need a megaphone, and 200 rifles came up and went safe, and the morning went quiet. He needed 2 volunteers to take the range truck downrange and reset the steel at the 600 and the 1,000. It is an ordinary chore. The truck was an old crew cab pickup the color of nothing, 20 years old, used for exactly this, hauling a couple of people and some tools down the gravel access road that runs along the base of the berm so the targets can be scored and stood back up. Galt asked for hands, and Rourke and Ingram were up before he finished the sentence, eager, I think, to be the real Marines in a yard full of civilians, to do the soldierly chore in front of the tourist and the old men. "Slow on the berm road, gentlemen," Galt told them, tossing the keys. "That truck is older than both of you, and it does not like to be hurried. Walking pace past the firing points. I mean it." They said yes, Gunny, in the way young men say yes to a thing they have already decided to do their own way. And they climbed in, the corporal driving, and they rolled out down the gravel toward the targets. I watched them go, because I watch everything, an old habit I have stopped apologizing for. I watched the truck pick up speed past the 400. I watched it pick up more past the 500. The corporal was driving, like the line was still watching him, like the chore was a performance, and the lean one was laughing in the passenger seat, and the dust came up behind them in a long tan rooster tail along the base of the berm. I heard it before I understood it. There was a sound of the tires losing the gravel, a slewing sideways sound, and then a heavier sound. Metal meeting ground in a way metal should not, and then a particular hush, the hush of 200 people understanding at the same instant that the thing they were half watching had just become real. The old truck had slewed on the loose grade where the gravel had washed thin, and a front wheel had dropped off the shoulder, and at the speed he was carrying it, the truck had not just stopped. It had gone over, rolled up onto its side, and then most of the way onto its roof and back, and it had come to rest on its side in a cloud of dust about 300 yards downrange. And then, while everyone watched, a thin line of fire stood up from underneath it. I was already moving. I want to be honest about the sequence, because the sequence is the only thing I am proud of. I did not decide to move and then move. The moving came first, and the deciding caught up to it somewhere around the second step. My body had been waiting 15 years to be needed like that again, and it did not wait for my permission, and I have never in my life been more grateful for a thing I did not consciously choose. Smoke stood up off the gravel 300 yards downrange, black now, oily, the smoke of fuel and not just dust. On the firing line, every head had turned toward it, and not one body moved, not one except mine, already gone, already running, the bag coming off my shoulder as I went. You have to understand what a cold range does to people, because it explains the freeze, and the freeze is the thing I need you to see in order to understand everything after. A firing line runs on rules so deep they become reflex. You do not move when the line is cold. You do not go down range without a command. The whole architecture of the place is built to keep people from doing the exact thing that the moment now demanded, which was to run toward the danger. So everyone froze, and they did not freeze because they were cowards. They froze because the place had trained them to freeze, and because fear had arrived, and because every person on that line was waiting, in the way people wait, for someone official to take the moment off their hands. Ingram had been thrown clear. I could see him as I ran, on his knees in the gravel maybe 30 feet from the truck, screaming his friend's name and not going back. I do not hold that against him. He was 22, and the world had just come apart, and the thing in front of him was on fire. He screamed, "He's stuck! He's stuck! Somebody, he's stuck!" And the somebody he was calling for was already passing him, and he did not even see me go by. A few others had started forward and stopped. 2 men ran halfway down the line of the berm and pulled up at the heat, hands raised against it, shouting things that were not plans. Galt was sprinting from the tower, but the tower was 200 yards the wrong way, and he was 58, and I could hear him bellowing for somebody to call 911 and bellowing for water and doing all the right things and being, through no fault of his own, too far away. Nobody appointed me. That is the part people never understand about a thing like this. There is no moment where someone hands you the authority. There is no order, no nod, no permission. There is only the gap between when a thing needs doing and when somebody does it, and you decide, in about a quarter of a second, whether you are going to live inside that gap or watch it from the line. I had lived inside that gap before. I knew the temperature of it. I ran into it the way you walk into a house you used to live in, knowing where the furniture is in the dark. I ran the arithmetic as I went out loud, only to myself, the old checklist coming up from somewhere below thought. Airway, hemorrhage, fire, time. Fire moves the time. Fire is the clock. I had maybe a minute before the cab was gone, maybe less, and a minute is a long time if you do not waste any of it, and no time at all if you waste even a little. I reached the truck. The heat was a wall, the same wall, the exact same wall I had leaned on in another country, and my body recognized it like an old enemy and did not flinch, because we had met before, and I knew its tricks. The cab was on its side, filling with smoke, the fire walking up the underside and the far quarter, and there in the cab, half upside down, pinned, was the corporal, Tyler Rourke, 24 years old, conscious, terrified. One leg trapped under a folded section of the door in the dash, his arm bleeding badly from something I could not see yet, the smoke pouring around him, the fire climbing. I got a hand on his collar. I put my face down close to his, close enough that he could not look anywhere but at me, and in the voice I built in another country, the flat, calm voice that is its own kind of tourniquet, I told him the first true thing. "Look at me," I said. "Just at me. Breathe. I have got you. We are going to do this together, and you are going to live. Breathe." He looked at me. That is the whole battle, in a thing like that, getting them to look at you, because a man looking at you is a man not yet wholly given over to the panic, and a man not given over to the panic will help you save him in small ways that add up. I read the wreck the way I once read a casualty, fast, top to bottom, sorting what is true from what is loud. The fire was loud. The fire wanted all my attention, and most of it was a lie, because the fire was not on him yet, it was on the truck, and there is a difference between a man near a fire and a man in one, and the difference is measured in seconds I could still spend. The pin was the truth, his leg was the truth, the arm was the truth. I made my decisions in the order the truths demanded, and not in the order the fear demanded, and that ordering is the entire difference between the people who can do this and the people who cannot. I could have waited. I want to be honest about that too, because the honesty is the point. There is a version of that minute where a sensible person stands back and waits the extra 30 seconds for the fire to make the decision unavoidable, where you let the truck become fully involved and you tell yourself there was nothing to be done. And no one would have blamed me, and it would have been a lie I could have lived behind for the rest of my life. I knew that version was available. I felt it offer itself. And I went in instead, because the other thing I know about myself, the thing the medal is a receipt for, is that I do not get to live behind that particular lie. I traded the right to it a long time ago, and I have never wanted it back. I braced my boots against the frame, and I got both hands on the folded door panel, and I pulled. And I felt the old hardware in my right shoulder light up like a struck match, the plate and the screws all reporting in at once. And I thought almost fondly, in the strange, clear way the mind works in those minutes, that the body keeps the receipt for everything, and that I was going to be paying for this one too, for years, and that it was a fair price. The panel gave. Not far. Far enough. His leg came free. Then I got him by the collar and the belt, and I hauled. There is nothing graceful about dragging a grown man who outweighs you across gravel. It is low and ugly, and you use your legs and your whole back, and the hardware in your shoulder screams the entire time, and you do not care. Because grace is not the goal. Distance is the goal. Distance between the man and the fire, and I got it. Foot by foot, until we were clear of the heat, until the wall was behind us, until the air was just air. He was on the gravel, and I was over him, and the fear in his face had been replaced by something worse, which is the calm that comes when a man has decided he is dying. I have seen that calm. It is more dangerous than panic, and it was while he was wearing that calm that he recognized me. I watched it happen. I watched the morning come back to him, the joke he had made an hour earlier, the word he had used, the brass and the back of the woman he had decided was a tourist. I watched all of it land on him harder than the crash had. "You're the tourist," he said. His voice was wrecked from the smoke. "Why are you saving me?" I did not answer him. I want you to know that I heard the question, that it went into me and stayed there, and that I would carry it for weeks and finally answer it in a parking lot at a flight base. But in that minute, I did not answer it, because there was a tension building in his chest that I needed to find and release before it killed him. And there was an arm that might or might not have a bleeder I could not yet rule out. And the truth I would eventually give him was not a thing you say while your hands are that busy. So I let the question hang in the smoke between us, and I went to work. I got the tourniquet high on the arm and cranked it tight, and I said the time out loud, and I took the grease pencil out of my breast pocket where it has lived for 15 years, and I wrote the time on his forehead, an old habit so that whoever took him next would know. and I have never once in my life felt more like myself than in the second I was writing the time on that boy's forehead while a truck burned 10 feet away. Everything I had ever been was in that second. The war and the medal and the sock drawer and the 5 a.m. runs and the steady hands. All of it had been packed and carried for 15 years for exactly this. And here, finally it was, and I went to work like the years had never stopped. There is a sound a person makes when they cannot get a breath, and I had been listening for it, and I heard it start. His chest was filling on one side where it should not have been. I got his shirt open and found the place, 2 fingers walking down the ribs, counting, and I took the decompression needle out of the kit and I drove it in below the collarbone in the spot I have found in the dark on men whose names I never learned. And there was the hiss, the small, ugly, beautiful hiss of pressure leaving a chest, and his next breath came deeper, and his eyes found mine again, and I kept talking, flat and calm and constant, the patter that is its own kind of medicine. It was about then that Galt arrived. 58 years old, and he had run 300 yards in boots, and he dropped to his knees on the other side of the corporal, chest heaving, and he did the thing that told me everything about him. He did not try to take over. He watched my hands for about 2 seconds, the tourniquet, the time on the forehead, the needle, the flat patter, and something settled in his face, some recognition older than the morning, and he stopped being a range master and became a man who had clearly knelt in the dirt next to a corpsman before and knew exactly what he was looking at. "Tell me what you need, Doc," he said. "You have got it. You run this." He called me Doc before he knew my name. I have thought about that a great deal since. Some men can read a thing by how it moves, the way you can know a fighter by how he stands before he ever throws a punch. Vernon Galt had spent 30 years around people who do what I was doing, and he knew, the way you know your own language being spoken in a foreign airport, that he was not looking at a tourist. He was looking at a corpsman. And he handed me the scene without my asking, and he became my hands, fetching what I called for, holding what I needed held. And we kept the corporal alive together on the gravel while the truck burned down behind us, and the sirens came up far away and then close. The county flight crew put down in the field beyond the berm in a storm of dust and noise, and the lead medic came across the gravel at a run with her bag, and she dropped in across from me, and her hands started moving even as her eyes were still taking the scene apart. Her name was Lacey Thorne. She was 31 and very good. I could tell in 3 seconds, the way you can always tell, and she was reading my field work as she took the handoff, the tourniquet time, the decompression, the airway, and I watched her register that none of it was amateur, that all of it was textbook, that the tourist had run a clean trauma resuscitation in the gravel. "That's a textbook line," she said, half to herself, working. "That is a perfect decompression. Who?" And then her eyes came up to my face and stopped, and I watched the second recognition of the morning happen, the bigger one. "Wait! Cardwell? HM1 Cardwell? You taught the burn module. I certified on your protocols. You wrote the field handoff sheet I still use. I said, take the arm. The tourniquet went on at 10:17. He's got a decompressed tension on the right. He's been talking the whole time. Let's keep him that way." She took the arm, but she had said my name and my rank out loud, in front of Galt and in front of the ring of people who had gathered at the edge of it, and you cannot unsay a thing like that, and it moved through the crowd the way water moves through cloth. Because there was a crowd now. The shooters and the Marines who had laughed an hour earlier had come down off the line, drawn the way people are drawn, and they stood in a loose, silent ring at the safe distance, and they watched the woman they had decided about run a trauma scene in the dirt and hand a living man up into a helicopter. I was aware of them the way you are aware of weather, at the edge of things, not important. I did not look up at them, and I did not perform for them, and I did not, in any part of me, enjoy the fact of them. That is the part I would want you to understand if you were ever in a ring like that, watching. The person in the middle is not thinking about you. The person in the middle is counting breaths and watching a color come back into a face and listening for a helicopter. And the crowd is just a thing that has to be kept from getting underfoot. Old Harlan Mott had appointed himself the keeper of the ring, I noticed later, holding people back at the right distance with his arms out, a 71-year-old man doing the one useful thing available to him, and I loved him for it, without having the spare attention to say so. Ingram was among them. He could not look at me. He stood with his hands hanging and his face wrong, and he could not make his eyes come up off the gravel. And somewhere behind me, in the parking lot, somebody had walked past my truck and read the plate, and I heard the word, Silver Star, travel through the ring in a low murmur, and I heard somebody say, Corpsman, and I heard somebody say she pulled him out, and the morning rearranged itself behind me without my having to say a single word in my own defense. The bird lifted with Rourke alive inside it. I sat back on my heels in the rotor wash with blood to my elbows and gravel pressed into my knees, and I was, for the first time in a great many years, completely and accidentally seen. And the strange thing, the thing I did not expect, is that it did not feel like victory. It felt like being caught. It felt like having a door opened on a private room. I had spent so long being invisible on purpose that being seen, even like this, even earned like this, felt less like a reward than like whether I would have to wait out. Galt wanted to make it big. I understood the impulse, and I loved him a little for it, and I told him no. He came and found me at the spigot where I was washing the gravel out of my palms, and he was shaken in the way men of his kind only get afterward, never during. And he said the base should know, and the press should know, and those two boys should answer for the mouth on the corporal and the driving that rolled the truck and nearly killed him. He said it the way a man says a thing he believes is simple justice. People should know what you did, he said, and what those two did, the one with the mouth especially. People should know. The report needs the facts, I said. It needs the speed of the truck and the wash and the gravel on that grade and the ceasefire procedure, so it does not happen to the next two boys. That is what people should know. The rest of it does not need me. He called you a tourist in front of the whole line, an hour before you went into a fire for him. I know what he called me, Gunny, I said. I was there. And then I told him the truth, because he had earned the truth by the way he had knelt down beside me and handed me the scene. I did not pull that boy out of a fire so I could win an argument. I stopped having that argument a long time ago. If I make this about the corporal's mouth, then his mouth becomes the most important thing that happened today. And his mouth was the least important thing that happened today. A man lived. That is the headline. Let it be the headline. Galt looked at me for a long moment, and then he nodded. Slow. The way a man nods when he disagrees with your decision and respects it more than he would have respected the decision he wanted. Aye, he said. Your scene, Doc. Your call. And he let it go, and that letting go was its own kind of salute, and I have not forgotten it. Ingram found me in the parking lot, the lean one. He came across the gravel like a much younger boy than he had been that morning, all the certainty gone out of him. And he stood in front of me and could not get the words out, and then he got them out wrong, which is how you know they were real. He was sorry. He was sorry about the corporal and about the joke and about the filming, and he wanted to delete the video. He was already deleting the video. His thumb was on it. Keep it, I said. He looked up at me, confused. Keep the video, I said. Not as a thing about me. Watch it sometime when you are older. Watch how sure you were. You did not know one true thing about that woman in the frame, not one, and you were completely certain about all of her. That is the most dangerous thing a person can be, and you are young enough to still cut it out of yourself. So keep it. Let it teach you the only thing worth learning today. He nodded, and he did not delete it, and he went away, changed in the small, permanent way a person changes when the floor of their certainty drops out. And I hope it held. I think it held. The story corrected itself going backward, which is the only direction a story like that can be corrected. By Monday, the base knew, and not because I told anyone, because I told no one, but because Vernon Galt could not stop telling it, and Lacey Thorne could not stop telling it, and between a retired gunnery sergeant and a flight medic, a thing gets told. Men who had laughed on the line that morning reheard their own laughter. The corporal's joke, which had been the cleverest thing said on the range at 10 o'clock, was by Monday the stupidest thing anyone had said in a month. And it had not changed at all in the meantime. Only the context had. Only the truth had caught up. That is how it goes. The truth is slow and it is sure, and it almost always comes back through the same door it was carried out of. There was a thing Lacey Thorne did, 2 days later, that I want to put down here because it is the kind of thing that does not make the story most people tell, and is actually the heart of it. She called me. She got my number from the flight base, one professional to another, and she called not to thank me, because we do not thank each other, but to tell me the corporal had made it through surgery and was going to keep the arm and the leg both, and to ask, almost shyly, whether I would come talk to her trauma class sometime about the burn module, the real version, the one that only people who have done it can teach. I said I would think about it. I have thought about it. I am still thinking about it. But I noticed that the offer did not make me feel seen the way the crowd in the ring had made me feel exposed. It made me feel useful, which is a different and better feeling And the difference between those two feelings is most of what this whole story is about. Being looked at is a cost. Being used well is a gift. They are not the same, and people who have never done the work confuse them constantly. I washed the last of the gravel out of my palms, and I got in my truck with the plate I had almost surrendered, and I drove home in a quiet cab, and I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired in the specific old way the work has always left me, a tiredness that lives below the muscles, a tiredness 15 years deep, and I drove home into it like a familiar country. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a bag of frozen peas on my right shoulder because the hardware in it had a great deal to say after the door, and I let the old day come up through the new one the way it had been wanting to all afternoon. I called Odile Devereaux because she is the only person I can say these things to plainly. Odile is 41, a former Navy nurse, and she and I speak a language that has maybe 400 fluent speakers left in the country, the language of people who held the broken pieces of other people's children in their hands for a living and came home and have to pretend at dinner parties that they sell insurance. I told her what had happened. Flat, in order, the way we tell each other things, without the decoration that civilians need. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "You went into a fire again. You know that, right? Faye, you actually did the thing. The exact thing." "I know." "How is the shoulder?" "Loud." "Of course it is loud," she said, and there was a smile in it and something under the smile. "You drove the door with the bad shoulder, didn't you? You absolute menace. You could have used the other side." "The other side had the better angle," I said, and we both let that be funny for a second, because if you cannot make it funny, you cannot make it at all. And then I told her the thing I can only tell her. I said that the worst day of my life and the best thing I am had turned out to be the same 9 minutes. The same one act repeated across 15 years and 2 fires, and that I have never once figured out how to be grateful and grieved in the right amounts, because the gratitude and the grief come from the same place and arrive at the same time and refuse to be sorted. I told her that when I was writing the time on that boy's forehead, I had been for 1 second completely happy, and that being happy in that second felt like a kind of betrayal of the men in the first fire, the ones I did not get to write a time for, and that I did not know what to do with happiness that arrives wearing the face of the worst thing that ever happened to me. "You honor them by being good at it," Odile said. "That is the only way it works. You do not get to give them back. You only get to be the reason somebody else's people get them back. That is the whole deal, Faye. We both signed it. There is no version where you save the ones you lost. There is only the version where you keep being the one who shows up." I thought about Bishop, calling for his mother in that small, clear voice. I thought about Tovar, who I did not let go of, who lived, who has children now, who sends me a card every year that I cannot always make myself open on the day it comes. The cards are simple. He is not a writer. They say the same few things every December, that he is well, that the kids are growing, that he thinks of me, and at the bottom, every year, the same 4 words underlined twice: "You did not quit." I keep them in a shoebox I do not look in often. I had thought about that shoebox while I was driving the door with my bad shoulder, not in words. There is never time for words in that minute, but somewhere below words, in the place where the body keeps its real reasons. Part of me went into that gravel for the corporal, and part of me went in for a lance corporal who called for his mother in 2011, and a December card I cannot always open, and the truck on the range and the truck in Helmand were, for the length of that minute, the same truck, and I was the same woman, and that is either the great wound of my life or the great gift of it. And I have stopped trying to decide which, because I have come to believe it is both, permanently, and that learning to carry both at once without dropping either is the actual work, the work under the work, the thing they do not give you a medal for. I understood, sitting in my kitchen with the peas going soft on my shoulder, that part of why I had run into the gravel that morning was a debt that can never actually be paid, only serviced, only honored, one stranger at a time, forever, and that I had made my peace with carrying that debt a long time ago, on the same day I made my peace with the medal. And here's the thing I most need you to hear, the thing this channel always comes back to. Being proven right about myself, in front of the men who had decided I was nothing, felt like almost nothing at all. There was no rush of vindication. The corporal saying, "You're the tourist," and meaning it as the worst thing about me, and then living because of the thing he was mocking, did not feel like winning. It barely registered. The peace I felt that night was not the peace of having won an argument. It was older and quieter and entirely my own, and it had been mine before the corporal ever opened his mouth, and it would have been mine if the truck had never rolled. The recognition was nice. but I had stopped needing it years before it arrived, and a thing you have stopped needing cannot make you whole when it finally comes. It can only confirm that you were already whole, alone, in the dark, with no one watching. That is the only place wholeness is ever actually built. I turned off the light, the medal stayed in the sock drawer where it lives, and I slept the way I always sleep after a day like that. Badly for an hour and then very deeply, the sleep of a body that has finally been allowed to do the one thing it was built for. Corporal Tyler Rourke came to find me about 5 weeks later. He had lived, which I had known he would, because I had handed him to Lacey Thorne breathing, and because Lacey Thorne is very good. He had a long recovery in front of him, and a burn scar running up the inside of one forearm that he would carry for the rest of his life, a permanent record of a morning he would also carry for the rest of his life, and the two of them, the scar and the morning, would grow up together. He tracked me down at the flight base where I work, which took some doing, and he was waiting by my truck at the end of a shift, in civilian clothes, looking younger and smaller than he had on the line, the way the loud ones always do once the loud has been knocked out of them. He had clearly rehearsed something. I could see the shape of the rehearsed thing in his face, and then he saw me, and the rehearsed thing fell apart, the way they always do. And what came out instead was the real thing, which was just the question again, the one from the gravel, the one I had not been able to answer with my hands full. "I called you nothing," he said. "In front of everybody. I made everybody laugh at you. And an hour later, you came into a fire after me. You drove the door with a bad shoulder, the medic told me. You have got plates in it. And you drove the door anyway, for me, after what I said." His voice was not steady. "I have to know why. I have been trying to figure it out for 5 weeks. Why would you do that? For me? Why are you saving me? I need to know why." I leaned against my truck next to him, the plate I had almost surrendered right there by his knee. And I gave him the answer I had not had the breath for in the gravel. I had had 5 weeks to find the words for it, and in the end, the words were very simple, because the true things usually are. "I did not go in because you deserved it," I said. "I want you to hear that part exactly. It had nothing to do with you. You had not earned a single thing from me, and I went in anyway, all the way in, and I would do it again tomorrow. And the reason is the most important thing I know about myself. So listen. The day I start checking whether a man has earned saving before I save him is the day I stop being who I am. The whole point of the work, the entire point, is that it does not run on whether you deserve it. It runs on whether I am willing to be the kind of person who goes. That is not about you. It is about me. I do not get to keep my steadiness for the people who are polite to me and withhold it from the ones who are not. It does not work that way. It is not a reward I hand out. It is just what I am, in all weather, the same person in the minute you mocked me and the minute you were dying. If it had a price tag, it would not be worth anything." He was crying a little, the way young men cry, fighting it, losing. "So here is your job now," I said, and I said it gently because gentle was what the moment needed. "You do not owe me. You cannot pay me back, and you should not try. What you can do is become someone worth the trouble. You got pulled out of a fire by a stranger you had been cruel to. That is a debt you pay forward to people who will never know my name for the rest of your life. Go be the kind of man who runs into the gap while everyone else is still deciding. That is the only thank you I will accept, and you have got about 50 years to deliver it. Now go home and heal up." I gave him my number, which surprised me as much as it surprised him, and I told him to call me when he made sergeant and meant it, and I meant it too. I did not adopt him. I did not absolve the line or rejoin anything or pretend the morning had not happened. I left one door open, 1 inch, for the one person who had paid enough to walk through it, and I closed the rest, and that felt exactly right. Because grace is not the same as amnesia, and a door held open 1 inch is still a door you can see daylight through. Then I pulled my gloves on over hands that have saved more strangers than I can count, and I walked back to my aircraft, and I left him standing in the lot to become whoever he was going to become. I want to say one thing to you directly. You, whoever you are, sitting wherever you are, listening to a stranger tell a story about a fire. If you have ever been the person a room decided about before they knew your name, I learned something in 2 different fires that I would like to give to you because it cost me a great deal and it should not have to cost you the same. You do not owe them the correction. You do not have to turn around on the line and prove you are not a tourist. You do not have to make them understand. Let your hands do their work where you can do it, quietly, well, in all weather, and let the truth find its own way back through the door it was carried out of. It always does, eventually. It is slower than you want, and it is surer than you fear. And the strangest part, the part nobody tells you, is that by the time the truth comes back, you will mostly have stopped needing it to. Because the thing the waiting builds in you, the steadiness, the not needing, that was the real prize the entire time. The recognition is just the receipt. Do not frame your receipts. Being seen is nice. I will not pretend it is not. But being useful is better, and being useful does not require an audience, and the quietest person on any line is very often the one you want beside you when it burns. I have been the tourist in 100 rooms. I will be the tourist in 100 more. I have stopped minding. I keep my kit packed and my hands steady and my small things in their rows. And when the gap opens between when a thing needs doing and when someone does it, I step into it, because that is who I turned out to be. And I built that person alone, in the dark, with no one watching, which is the only place any of us ever actually build anything that lasts. So be steady. Be the one who moves while everyone else is still deciding. Keep your kit packed in whatever form your kit takes. And the next time someone calls you a tourist, smile and let them. You will know who you are. You will have always known. That was the only vote that ever counted, and it was yours the whole time, and no one on any line can take it from you, and no one ever could. The flag hangs dead. The horizon is clean, and somewhere a young man is learning to run toward the fire instead of away from it. Because once a stranger, he had been cruel to did exactly that for him, and that is how it moves, person to person, fire to fire, the long, slow honoring of a debt that can never be paid and was never meant to be. Keep your hands steady. I will keep mine steady too. And we will both be there, you and I, in the gap, when the next thing comes apart.